festivals are a kind of checks and balance system for the movie-making industry. You know, the general rule of thumb, if you spend 10 minutes talking to anybody in the industry, is that nobody knows anything, and that, you know, this is kind of their way of sitting back and going, well, let's see how it does. And then when the crowds are cheering and they line up, and when you get good reviews, they say, oh yeah, I knew that was good. And it's just a checks and balance system that lets the new people get in who aren't, don't have Arnold Schwarzenegger in their film.
I thought that the way to get into movies was through the kind of art world, through film festivals and stuff, because that's how everybody was getting, known, Soderbergh and all those guys. And so I tried that. I'm not good at that, and I'm bad at that, and I just, was failing, and I looked around my house and I said, saw my movie posters that are up, and I saw Jaws and The Exorcist and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I said, I should just make one of those. I don't think people, wait for permission to make one of those. Just go make one of those. So I sit down and I said, I love ghosts.
I saw something recently, I'm sure you've talked about this before, you pay for your own films, which is incredible to me. Can you talk about how that came about, and how does that work? You just put it all up front, and then
Yes.
I'm just curious how that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I wouldn't recommend you do it.
It's unbelievable.
You're mortgaging your house, but luckily, I literally mortgaged my house to do it originally with The Visit. Basically, I came to this feeling of the way the industry wanted me to make movies, or anybody, but me in specific, I was incapable of doing that. I really got to the place where I was like, I'll just write novels, or I'll do plays. I can't do this, so I said, let me try just to go and play street ball. Like if I was an NBA player, to go, I just want to remember how much I love the game, with no referees, nothing. Just get out of the car, put my sneakers on, and go play street ball against the very best street ball players in the world. That's my dream if I was an NBA player, that I would remind myself of, and that's what The Visit was. So I just paid for it, did it, and got very close to it all falling apart. Wow. Because, the system doesn't ingest new ideas very easily. And because a series of just, all great stories have that moment where it was just, if this one little thing didn't happen, it would have been a disaster. But those little things did happen, and we turned the corner, and then The Visit went, it cost me, 5 times as much money as it cost I made on opening weekend, in a movie that no one wanted, no one believed in, no one believed in the humor and horror together, all of that stuff. And then that began this run that, as we are here today, and I don't take it, I still want to risk constantly and say, hey, look, the individual's voice is what the audience wants to see, with that respects the audience. This isn't a lecture. This is definitely about a love of the audience, and I found a way, at least temporarily, to work with the system.
The very first movie I made when I was 21, it was set in India, and I was I was one of you guys. I was the lead of it, and no one saw it except my family. And it was like, and my dad said to me, "Put white people in your movies," and and then boom, 6 cents. Yeah, yeah. That is just impossible. That's cruel. It's not possible, because at 2 o'clock I'll have a different 4 than at 8 p.m. There's movies that I like. I think best adventure is Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the best horror movie is Exorcist, and Godfather's up there as the best movie, period. So, you come to our house, you can see all the movie posters, and that's where. And Jaws has the most perfect balance of, kind of humor and everything in it, just perfectly balanced. Well, that's 4 right there.
Yeah. This is an impossible role, a giant who can emote and do 30 pages of monologue. This doesn't exist. This person doesn't exist. And then I was like, wait a minute, what about that guy in Blade Runner 2049? I don't know much about wrestling, so it wasn't like I had that in my head. And probably if I did, I might have been blinded to the fact that this person was an amazing actor. But I was like, that guy was incredible. He was a giant and all. So they said his name was Dave Bautista. And so we were shooting the marriage flashback in 6 Sense. Bruce did his lines. He goes, "I think we got it." And he stares at me really hard.
And I was like, no. And I went over and leaned in, and he kind of like did this, kind of like he might punch me. And he was like listening with side eye. And then I was like, you know, emotionally do this. And then he kind of just stared at me. And then I go, roll cameras, roll sound, here we go. I didn't give him a chance to respond. And then he nails it. And that performance is in the movie. And then I was like, check the gate. And I looked at him, and they said, the AD says, Bruce wants to see you. And I was like, oh, man. Go to the trailer, knock on the trailer door. Then he opens the trailer. Like, I'm looking at him, and I'm looking up. He opens the door, and he has his shirt off with a towel around him. And then he goes, I just wanted to say, I've only felt this one time before, and that was with Pulp Fiction and Quentin. And then I was like, thanks, Bruce. And then door closes, and I literally skipped down the sidewalk. During the pandemic, I put together kind of 20, 22, 23, 24 episodes, and ideas. Like, could we do an episode about this? Could it be structured this? And this episode, the one you're referring to, the first episode of the final season, I was like, oh, wow, you know, we're going to do an episode all inside of a car outside the brownstone. That should be the first episode of the final season. So we're like, hey, guys, we're in it. We're full tilt boogie now into the final battle.